Well, hello again, everybody. I'm Dan John from danjohnuniversity.com, and this is episode 204 of the danjohnuniversity.com podcast. Thanks for being here. As always, if you have questions, please email them to us at podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. I get a lot of direct messages and comments of people asking me how to answer questions in the podcast. I'll even get emails sometimes. This might be a good question for the podcast. The best place to send questions for the podcast are at podcast@danjohnuniversity.com. It just saves me a lot of extra work. It's not a lot of extra work, but it just saves me a little bit of time and energy if you can send it to the right place. Today we don't have a ton of questions today, but we have a couple of questions. I kind of really like two of them a lot. I'll try not to show that too much, that I really think are outstanding questions and really got me thinking. And the first one here is from Rick. And Rick says, I'm a 48-year-old man who weighs 183 pounds. I train 5 to 6 days a week. And keep your weight down there if you can. 3 days of barbell compound lifts and body weight exercises, and 2 to 3 days of the fun stuff. That's barbell complexes, the armor building complex, the humane burpee, loaded carries, and sled pushes and drags. Just hearing that makes me happy. It's nice to see that it's obviously following my work, and it's an honor, and I hope I haven't led you astray in any way. And that rhymed. I didn't expect that. I am very interested in how your two 2x2 quadrants relate to each other. When I first read this question, I went through and I read it again, and then I realized what he was asking. Now, gentle listener, I got to warn you, my brain works in very much a both and sort of way. I'm not very good at black and white, which is either or questions. It's just not something I'm good at, but I love both and. And when you get into a both and thinking, you often end up in quadrants. That's why I like the Dwight Eisenhower decision thing. Important, not important, urgent, not urgent. And then it's a great time management system. If you put down all the things you have to do and something is urgent and important, that means you do it now. If something's not important, I don't think you should do it at all. Though I will still do things that are unimportant to me because very often they're important to somebody else. Like when you work in a company or when you're in a family or just about any interaction with other humans. So I love quadrants because I think it gives you that chance to see things and all of a sudden you can make those little things come to life. I get it. When we talk about humans, I know in Ayurvedic medicine, we break humans down into 3 basic types, but really then there's those, we're Vata Pitta types, Pitta Vata types, and we break things down. Myers-Briggs gave us 16 different places to put ourselves. That'd be hard to work with globally, I think, with a team. But if I can figure out something that's in the wheelhouse of 4 basic options, even if we have to kind of shove something that doesn't work perfectly into one of those 4 options, it's still better than black-white, okay? So his question is very good. So I have 2 quadrants. One is from Easy Strength. The best place to get the book Easy Strength is at danjohnuniversity.com/bookstore. That's where it is. And the PDF is the PDF. In there, I discuss this topic a lot of both the quadrants, the original quadrants, and it comes out to this. The original idea was, on one, on the line going up, it was, what is the absolute best humans can do? That was this way here. We're talking 1,000-pound deadlifts. We're talking 9.700 meters, that kind of thing. And on the other line, the horizontal line, it was the number of qualities it takes to do a given sport, game, or occupation, I guess. So at a very, very low level of human endeavor, but with lots and lots and lots of things you have to learn, qualities, I consider that like a school physical education course. That's quadrant 1. Quadrant 2 is lots and lots of things you need to know, but at a fairly high level, and I consider that collision occupations. That'd be your special forces, American football, and rugby. And the rugby-related sports, you obviously could probably include Gaelic football, maybe hurling, Australian rules football, rugby league, rugby union, sevens. I mean, you got a lot of options there, okay? So that's quadrant 2. Quadrant 3 doesn't sound like much, but that's how I train most athletes. The levels of strength needed to be an elite discus thrower are freakishly high for like a normal person, but freakishly low for a strength athlete. So you got to find those numbers. I call those standards. And then once I get you the standards in the weight room, then we just worry about the most beautiful, perfect biomechanically correct technique we can get you. And then we want to make sure your arousal level, your heart rate, and your tension level are all dialed in for elite performance. And you bring your throwing shoes and your discus at the competition. That's quadrant 3. Basically, most of human life, most sports are quadrant 3. Basically one technique, and then get as strong as appropriate. Quadrant 4 is generally a sport that has like one true quality. So absolute speed in the 100 meters, just freakish low gear strength in the deadlift. And that's it. You know, no one throws anything at you in the 100 meters. You don't need agility. You don't need a lot of things to be a great 100-meter runner. But what you do need, you need it at levels that practically, well, let's just say very, very few humans will ever be able to achieve. So that's the major quadrant. And that's from Easy Strength Omni book. You can find it at danjohnuniversity.com/bookstore. The other quadrant is something I've been working with now, and this one's a little different. Push-pull is on the top, hinge squat is on the side, and I had this conversation with Pavel, and I figured out that a guy like me, I'm a push hinger. I was the best bench presser ever, anywhere. I can press, and I'm really gifted at the hinge. Yay for me. But I suck at the pull-up, and I'm not very good at the squat. Slide over, there's the push hingers, which Pavel's a great example of. And if you'll notice that at Strong First, they have the tactical strength challenge, kettlebell snatch, deadlift, and pull-up. It's pulls and hinges. There's no press there. If you're we'll slide down now to the squats. If you're a squat pusher, you would tend to be maybe an Olympic lifting type, that at least back in the day, but still great value. If you watch the way the elite, especially in the lighter classes, lifters put the bar over their head now, I mean, it's a marvelous looking, it's a push that is just something, especially that deep squat jerk they do now is something I wouldn't have guessed athletes would ever do, and it's amazing to watch. On pull squatters, from what I've seen and the feedback I've gotten, that's your rock climbing people. Now, obviously, many people will mix in there somewhere, but his idea, so the questioner, Rick's idea, was looking at these together. I hope that introduction wasn't too much, but I thought it was important. How do people who exemplify the different pairs on the push-pull hinge squat quadrant fare on Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4 activities in the relationship to absolute maximum number of qualities needed quadrant? Aren't you glad I took a moment to explain that before I had that question? I suspect that I'm a pull squatter and I do emergency management and humanitarian work, so I'm very interested in how well you think pull squatters do in Q2 occupations. I gotta tell you, if you're someone who has to save people from water events, flooding, swimming pools, ocean stuff, it'd be really nice to be a puller. Pull yourself out of trouble. Squat, probably not a bad idea if you have to do some kind of egress and entrance into some kind of small place. Personally, I wouldn't want to do it. Despite running the risk of adding another element, how do people move generally factor in? How people move generally factor in? I apologize for this struggle in reading that. Some people are very explosive by nature. Others are more slow and steady movers. Well, let's not move into the tortoise and the hare on this, because I think your question by itself was good. As I was thinking about your question, I thought about track and field. Now, track and field is basically a Q3 sport. No, every event, now if you're a decathlete or hept, we'll just throw that out for a second. Just give me a break on that. But almost in every event in track and field, there's generally one, at most three kinds of techniques. I have the triple jump encyclopedia there, and they do talk about a Soviet method, a Polish method. And I think they call another one the American method, but it might be someone's name actually. And it's the way you attack the triple jump. It's the way you deal with the triple jump. But really, it's like we used to say when I was young, it's a hop, a skip, and a jump. And there might be other small ways to look at it, but outside of, crazies, no one else is going to notice it. In the discus, there's basically three styles of throwing. There's the linear technique, John Powell. There's the Utah State technique with the big wide leg. And there's the East German model, which was really established to allow athletes to do really well in stadium situations. It's a no reverse technique. It is a big leg out of the back, but it is a massive pull around the axis at the end. The correct answer would be elements of all three would be the best. But really, pick a discus throwing technique and stick with it. And then get as strong as you need to get as powerful as you need to get all those qualities. And you'll never be as strong as an Olympic lifter. You'll never be as strong as a power lifter. But they're not going to be able to throw the discus as far as you. There's track and field in a nutshell. When I was looking at track and field, one of the first thoughts I had, Rick, was that track and field seems to support hinging. If you look especially at the modern high jump method, it's very close. The jump in high jump is and the jump in a volleyball, I don't remember what they call the ones coming in. It's not strikers, but it's something like that. The athletes who come in from the side and just slam the ball, off in a cross court, but they're the ones who jump up and bam, slam down. Their approach and the high jump approach are so close to each other. So I think you'll notice that in track and field, it tends to favor hingers, not squatters. Now, the power sports tend to favor squatters. When you look at Ed Cohen's sumo-style deadlift and his squat techniques, you'll see a person who is born to do that sport, in my humble opinion. When you look at the Chinese Olympic team lift, not only do they have a lot of people they pull from, but when you look at them, it seems like the DNA is helping them with the techniques they decide to do. So now I got to be a little careful on the push-pull stuff, but I would imagine that power lifters tend to be more pushers because of the bench and then just hanging on the deadlift. It certainly wouldn't it would hurt that a swimmer, for example, be born to do pulls, whether or not, and of course they don't squat across the pool. They hinge those legs if they even need to use them. As I understand now, they're important again. So I like your question here. I think there's some real value to it. Now, I hadn't thought of this, but you'll probably notice in the American sports that hinge and push are probably most often the things we do, Americans. As you go around the planet, it would be interesting to watch how that changes and shifts by the sports that everyone seems to love the most. There's no way I could be a Cossack dancer. I just don't have the structure in my hips for it. When I was young, we used to play around with it, and I don't even know why we did it. But, I could do a few things, and I'd have friends at school, they were able to do the whole thing when they stuck their hands in the back, kicked them up, and, did all this stuff. That's DNA. Those same friends didn't end up being Division I discus throwers. So I don't know where I'm heading on that particular concept, but I do think that this idea that the push-pull hinge squat. If you've been lifting for 5 or 6 years and you've also found yourself doing well in a certain sport, I wouldn't be surprised, Rick, to get around to your whole point if the two of them don't dance together somehow. That's as good as I can tell you without really, getting a little bit over the top. I was about to make a joke about being a Virgo, but I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole of some of this stuff, because I also think if the will is there, you can get yourself to a fairly high level in any sport you choose to do. But the reality is getting to the very top is going to be a little bit different. Rick, that question really made me happy. I actually think it was nice, because I think you made me think. I think you made me think. And I think that's important, because when I go to workshops sometimes, people ask me questions, and a question like you had here really will prepare me for some of those more individual questions that people come up with. So I really want to thank you so much, because that was a fun question to answer, okay? Thank you. Really appreciate it. Jason asked a question. It's a good question. He says, I've hit a snag in my kettlebell training. I think I'm going to say this right, folks. I have Diastasis Recti, and I know what it is. It's that condition. Where the area between your six pack spreads apart and weakens. And we'll get to that in a moment. And was wondering if you had any insight on which kettlebell exercises, if any, I should avoid and which you would recommend. I understand you're not a medical professional. I'm just asking for general feedback. Thank you for your time and take care. So with this condition, Diastasis Recti, I think I'm saying it right, there is a general weakening of the ab wall, okay? Like you're being pulled apart. 60% of pregnant women get this at some level. Some women need, down the road, need surgeries to address the issue. It can be very, I hate to be, I'm a horrible person, but it can be very unflattering. And I know a number of women who are extremely uncomfortable with it. And I know that there is a surgery option for it, and it can be a very difficult surgery to recover from, as you do get kind of bent over during part of the recovery. Men also get it, obviously much less, because pregnancy seems to be the issue. It is possible to get injured. My umbilical hernia, I probably also had this condition, but I was able to kind of I was able to do some exercises to rebuild it. I got an umbilical hernia from a hot yoga class when the instructor pushed my shoulders back in a position, and instead of my body opening up like a lotus petal, my belly button grew very quickly, which was really weird to look at. And then I had to have a surgery to fix that. Now I have a little bit of chain link in my belly. I was taking hot yoga to help me recover from all the weightlifting, and I got hurt doing okay. So it's interesting, because when you look at some of the recommendations online, the most common, there's a couple of recommendations. One is avoid heavy lifting, and you're asking me about kettlebell exercises. Another one is to avoid asymmetrical loading, which is my favorite part of kettlebell exercises, the grinds anyway, not the ballistics. That's not true. I'm not a huge fan of single arm swings, because very often people do a lot of excessive bending and twisting, and if it's not done correctly, I worry about it. I do like, obviously, the kettlebell snatch. So, but I think there's an ability with the kettlebell snatch to correct all that extra twisting because of that pause at the top. I looked, as I was looking it up, I got some other things. They do recommend that when you roll around, like when you roll in the bed, you grab your knees and you take all the pressure you can off the area. And then I started reading some articles about how to cure it for men. And it was funny because it brought me back to this book I first got in 1984, Quantum Fitness by Irving Dardick. And he's the one that first taught me about the pelvic tilt, which later became the glute bridge, which later became the hip thrust. At least in my life, I know the hip thrust. I know these exercises have been around forever, but it was on page 108. It was this idea of doing ab work, and the ab work, and every single listener can utilize what I'm about to say. When you do ab work and you have any issues, and by the way, when I say this, if you gotta be careful, I guess I'm gonna say it. With lower back issues, it's not an if, it's a when you're gonna have a lower back issue. Okay, that's my experience. Nearly every person I've ever worked with at some time or other gets a lower back issue. Now, this year I hurt my lower back shoveling snow. And it embarrassed me to say it out loud, but we also had 66 feet of snow this summer season. Not summer, but winter season. And after day 75 of shoveling snow, your precision isn't where it used to be. And I got myself caught and I twisted a little bit extra and my right lower back started barking at me. The nice thing was it was the same injury I got as a discus thrower, so I knew what to do with it. And what you do with it when your lower back hurts or when you have this condition is whenever you do an ab exercise, the first thing you do is drive your lower back into the ground as hard as you can. In fact, that exercise by itself, just, you can cross your arms, lay on the floor, and then push your lower back in as hard as you can. If you're driving right now, push your lower back into the lower part of the seat right now. If you're sitting, push your lower back in. Make it a small movement. And what you'll notice is that your ab wall contracts. When I'm teaching the senior group, the senior center group, or anybody over 65, we break down ab work into two parts. And the first is to press. So step one, press the lower back into the ground. Step two is curl the shoulders forward. When I do this, now remember, we all learned this from Jerry Maguire, the human head weighs 8 pounds or whatever it is. But this is a big load, especially the fact that it's at the end here. You get that, that long arm here. So when I press my lower back in like this, when I curl up, I have plenty of load there. And by the way, the curl motion is shockingly small. And when you do it, you'll notice that your 6-pack or 8-pack, whatever you have, completely locks up. It's very safe. There's no, if you do press, curl, press, curl, press, curl, press, curl, like that. There's no ballistic in it. It's very friendly to the back. It's very friendly to the 6-pack. Now, obviously, I haven't been telling you what kettlebell exercise to do or to avoid. I would like to be there with you, Jason, because I'd like to see which ones really make this thing explode. I would love to say that overhead presses should be fine, but your mileage may vary. The stronger your connection is, the stronger your knitting is, the more locked and loaded you can be on a press. But if you have issues with that softening up, that might be an issue. I don't think I can recommend goblet squats to you because we know that what makes the glutes work harder in the goblet squat is letting the hands drift away from the body more. Okay? The only problem with when this happens, your ab wall has to lock down. And as that's going on, you might be getting a little bit opposite of what you want. Weirdly, and I'd like you to get clearance from your doctor on this, I was wondering if the kettlebell snatch might be an okay exercise. I was just done correctly. So the bell, the bell stays relatively close to you as it comes up. Swing, boom, a little elbow pop, stab the ceiling. Swing, boom, boom, swing, boom, boom. And then when you come down, if you just cast it coming down with your hand close to your nose, we sometimes call that swimming or pouring out the pitcher or unzip the jacket, whatever it is, but keeping the hand close, that might be okay. Though I would like you to have a medical professional, bring your kettlebell into the room and show them what you're doing and get some feedback. I think there's parts of the Turkish getup that might be okay, but the problem is I think the groundwork is going to have to be no until you can, get some movement ahead. Lower back and ab injuries are the two hardest to work around. I mean, I worked out hard with just after wrist surgeries, no problem at all. I Olympic lifted after cutting the end off my finger. It didn't bother me at all. And look how good it looks now. I mean, with total hip, you could do upper body work. With a knee injury, you can work the other leg and you can work upper body. Honestly, the worst injury to work around is a neck injury. Even if it's just like you just needed to get it, because it just seems to radiate out issues. But abs and lower back are tough because they're hard to work around. I would like to go back to your doctor, your therapist, and show, maybe even bring a book and just say, what about this? What about this? What about this? But try those press curl sit-ups. Try some, if you can, try some gentle hip thrusts. If you can, do some walking or heavy hands if you can. And if it can heal on its own, use exercise to nudge the recovery. If it needs surgery, use exercise to prepare yourself for what you can do after the surgery, post-recovery, okay? I felt like I was giving medical advice there, but I really tried not to, okay? Good question. Thank you. We have a question from Mark. The chin-up is my favorite exercise. Sometimes I do a few sets of high reps, sometimes many sets of low reps, sometimes few sets of a few weighted chin-ups. I'm 33 and wonder if there's a way to condition my body so that I can manage high volume chin-ups as I get older. I never go to failure and perform them on rings. Well, I tell you, Mark, you've answered every smart thing I could possibly say. You have a great variation of reps and sets. You use rings. You don't go to failure. You've taken away all the good stuff. I've hit all my main chin-up goals in terms of rep and weight, but I do worry about MAPS, middle-age pull-up syndrome. That's when the ends of your elbows just are like hell doing chin-ups or pull-ups. And I wonder if I can do chins into my golden years if I start planning ahead. Chin-ups feel almost like a meditation to me, and I would like to hold on to them for as long as possible. Any advice would be greatly appreciated. Well, one of the people I work with, she uses the chin-up as her measurement for everything. She can almost tell me her body weight by the number of chins she can do. It's that cut and dry. Honestly, I have somewhere in my files, I've got that great 1937 or 38 track and field book by the USC coach. And basically every single event, chin up, chin up, chin up, chin up, chin up. Chin-ups and pull-ups are the answers to so many issues back in the day. That and walking every day. It's funny to see that. You're doing the right things. I would, if I were you, because you're doing so well, don't try, and this is a conversation Pat Flynn and I have had many times. Pat Flynn, for the book, started because it was like his thing, started doing the strongman show with one-arm chin-ups. Well, the problem is when you're doing one-arm chin-ups, you're only one rep from really, kind of pinging yourself. And I mean, I don't want to say completely injuring, but you know what I'm talking about, I think, because you seem to understand things well here, Mark. So you're only you're only one bad example from hurting yourself. The things I would consider is I would change the way you test first off. And then after that, I'm going to just say, stay with the rings. Don't go to failure. Keep mixing and matching your reps and sets. The only thing is on your tests, I would like you to encourage to do the tests the way I do them now. So I expect you to, this is how I test pull-ups and chin-ups. Hang for 30 seconds. At the end of 30 seconds, your friend goes, go, you do a chin-up. You then hang, that's straight arm hang, for another 30 seconds. Your friend says go, you do chin-up number 2. You then hang for 30 seconds. Your buddy says go, you do number 3. You then hang for 30 seconds. And then your buddy says, go, and you do 4. That's what 4 is. One of the things I like about it, testing it that way, I did have someone do 6 for me in England. It was pretty impressive, because that's 3 minutes of hanging and pull-ups in between. But what's nice about testing it that way, Mark, is that you're not going to run yourself into those crappy half reps very much. Those, when someone's doing a test, they get kind of caught here, right here. I think that's where the problem starts to arise. I think that's where you've got all your body mass on, tendons that are designed, to whip sticks at mastodons, not to, do a pull-up test in the middle of the woods. So that would be the only piece of advice that you don't already know, and change the way you test and make your elbows much happier. Okay, good question. Thank you. We have a question from David. I'm looking for your insight on retiring from contact sport as a relatively competitive person. Male, 105K, 231, 34 years old, rugby, strong and fit, but tired. That's a good point. I say competitive person, but I mean someone who has that extra gear, extra fight in them. I know that feeling. When competition starts, you know what you have, the well of aggression and drive to tap upon. I am looking to step back from rugby soon and worried that without the intensity and competitive reason to work out and improve the skills that I've used all my life, the drive to train and ability to hit the extra levels will leave me. I've been considering joining a competitive kettlebell club and or rowing club in my local area. I know these are not your sports, but I appreciate the knowledge and experience you have. Actually, I know all about those, but that's okay. I would love to hear your thoughts on how to manage this. Okay, 2 things. I think it's one of the big mistakes in our systems that we don't have a formal plan for athletes. The DDR, East Germany, used to have this very smart 4-year plan. So I think I mentioned it before on the podcast, and if I get something wrong, just kind of go with me. So you're on the Olympic team, but you're 28 years old. So you might not be around 4 years from now, but you've been training since you were 12. So it is time, instead of just going full stop, what we would then have you do the next year is that we would keep you at an internationally competitive level. We would still have you do the great summer skiing program that they used to do, and you ski for 6 weeks. We would still keep you on the nutritional stuff. We'd keep you on everything, but we might not send you to the world. We're not send you to this. We'll send you to a little bit lower level international meets. The following year, 2 years later, we would continue to support you in every single way. But now we might have you do one international meet where we announce to the crowd that you're retiring from international competition, and then you'll just compete at the nationals, the next level. 3rd year, the only meet you might go to is the nationals, and at the nationals, we would tell the crowd, this is the last meet you'll ever have, at the nationals, but you would compete in these regional, local meets, and I think you know where this is heading. In the 4th year, you go to the regional championship and you compete. And from then on, if you wish, you can be part of the club. You can certainly always train, but you're not on the training table anymore. You're not doing all the crazy stuff. You're not getting all the tests, you're not getting prodded and, pushed. I think it's brilliant. I was up for a job almost 10 years ago. at a very famous university. They wanted me to coordinate the sports and the sports strength and conditioning programs. And I think I could have handled it. It would have been good, but I was moving in a different direction, and literally. And let's be honest, they waited a little bit too long to get a hold of me. But when we had this one little interview, the first thing I said is, how do you guys, deal with these athletes? You build this kid up. He's 23 years old. He weighs 350 pounds, 155 kilos or more. And then all of a sudden one day you say, okay, thank you, bye-bye. What do you guys do to, get them into normal clothes, into normal chairs? And they looked at me, well, don't do anything. And I thought, well, you really need to. Some of them, it's usual. About 1 in 20 would figure it out, and they would, get themselves into, some of the guys. The most I'd ever heard of was a guy from, I think it was either Army or Navy, who dropped like 100 pounds in months. I mean, just a total change in human body type. If I were you, I would try to put together an intelligent step down. So if you're on a team, and I don't know, I'm getting the sense you're probably English, but it doesn't matter. But if you have if your club has an A team and a B team, maybe next year you strive to play the games with the B team and have a send-off home game with the A team. And I mean it. Take it seriously. This is the last time you're putting on the jersey, the kit, the what do you guys get? The jumper for your team. The next year, I would still play. I wouldn't take the off season nearly as seriously, and I would be that B team guy who shows up. The third year, I'm not saying you have to coach. I would still say you show up, you be around. If you can transition into other forms of rugby, the touch rugby. I'm not a big fan of touch rugby or flag rugby, but I understand the value of it. But get yourself in those games and maybe even slide over to some fun sevens games or something like that. But I would take at least 3 years to boom, boom, boom. The one thing I do wish as an athlete I could have done was have a much more structured farewell from my sports. My old weightlifting coach, Jim Schmitz, has a funny line about being a master's lifter. He goes, it's a farewell tour, Every time you put the bar down at a meet, you say farewell because you'll never see that much weight again. And sadly, it's true. It happens so fast. It's brutal. But I would suggest, if you were a single independent, a track athlete, a weightlifter, that you do the same thing by, okay, I'm still going to lift next year with all the guys, but I'm not putting on all the extra knee wraps or whatever it is. I'm not going to train 9 times a week. I'm going to train 3 times a week. Be careful, by the way, because you might get actually better doing this, but don't worry about it yet. So, just kind of make a nice little step down. I competed for my team, Hercules Barbell Club, for a couple of years, just so that we could win the state championships. And this was back when our state championships were on a logical schedule. Towards the end there, I would lift at the Union Christmas meet and at the state championship. They were just about maybe 4 months apart. So I'd lift in the Union Christmas meet with my team. Basically, it was on in their auditorium. It was a fun meet. I came in as an extra lifter sometimes, and sometimes I just lifted in the competition, get a sense of how strong I was, look at the state meet and say, okay, I'm going to add a few pounds, a few kilos to this and go again. I wish I would have stuck with that plan a little bit longer to gently walk away. I don't want to look into your heart and soul too much, but the fact that you even understand you're going through this is very unique, and I applaud you for it. And I really do hope it helps, okay? That was a fun set of questions today. Well, listen, folks, again, this podcast is driven by your excellent questions. So if you have a question, send them to podcast@danjohnuniversity.com, As I say, I'll do my best to answer each and every one. Sometimes, like we had today, there's not as many questions, but the questions are so good that I can make an entire podcast. I can make an entire book out of this material. So thank you. And as always, until next time, let's all keep on lifting and learning. Bye-bye.